Ahoy and howdy! I'm recording this mere days after Epithet Erased Prison of Plastic comes out, so if I seem scatterbrained and distracted, it actually has nothing to do with that book. I just have unmedicated ADHD, So, I took my first interest in D&D my freshman year of high school because of the inherent allure of the D20, and also ABD Illustrates, and in that vein, I have here a group picture of every D&D PC I have made and played, and I will be babbling about them in chronological order. Because of both Barbie the Island Princess and Roxy from Winx Club, I was for years deeply enamored with the idea of being able to talk with animals, and when I discovered druids had healing spells, meaning I could fill a tangible niche in party comp while still having a decent hit die and some bomb-ass spells, I proceeded to play exclusively druids for the next 2.5 years. My first being a gnome named Kevlar Harley David Loomcraft. Kevlar was an effort by me to be subversive, like, oh, you can totally be lawful good and also still be a chill person who doesn't constantly annoy people, because that was my idea of subversive in high school. I named him Kevlar and added that Harley Davidson reference to his name because I wanted it to contrast his soft, squishy nature. This became very funny when we collectively RP'd a game of Truth or Dare, and he kept coming up with the worst dares because he didn't want to make anyone say anything that made them uncomfortable, and he didn't want them doing anything embarrassing or dangerous. I love him so much. Kevlar holds a very special place in my heart, both as my first D&D character and as the way I met my partner, who I adore with my entire heart. We became friends incredibly fast because we thought it would be so vibes if Kevlar and the party's incredibly traumatized street urchin halfling rogue lesbian were friends, and he acted as the entirety of her impulse control while she acted as oil to his hinges loosening up. The tea party I've drawn here in this picture is at Kevlar's little cottage, mostly because it was either that, or I make up a setting for the next character in line to call home. Speaking of, I mentioned ABD Illustrates being a catalyst for my D endeavors, and he once said that there is no rule saying your D&D characters have to follow a particular visual aesthetic. You can mash up and justify literally anything you set your mind to. So, with that in mind, I decided my next druid was going to be a pastel goth. This campaign was with a completely different group of people from the last, and surprisingly, despite the fact that I was friends with 2 out of the 10 people there, the entire experience was incredibly stressful. I didn't write a backstory for my pastel goth, and in fact named her Puma Vine based on Warrior Cat's logic. And then the rogue in the party killed the most important NPC by invisibly sneaking behind the dragon said NPC controlled, and basically evaporated all her hit points via sneak attack damage, because sneak attack is even more broken in 3.5! So the campaign that was supposed to last long enough for us to grind to 15th level ended at level 6. In that time, I developed a very understated devil-may-care Wednesday Addams but replaced most of the morbidity with mildly fun snarking kind of personality for Puma Vine. In my head, she left some comparatively cushy life situation and started dungeon diving because at least if she dies in a dungeon, she'll have died doing something worth her time. Also, sometimes I would leave my character sheet at home, which meant I had to use one of the backup character sheets, a dwarven fighter I dubbed Rachel. And in my head, the reason Rachel regularly tagged in was that she and Puma Vine had a magic pact that activates fully randomly. So neither of them are phased when they wake up having swapped places. What do they get in exchange for this inconvenience? I never figured that out! Now, you may be wondering, hey, wait a second. The whole campaign just ended because one important NPC died? Yes! The DM for the group was one of my friend's moms, hence why we were playing 3.5, and she did not build complex worlds and structure flexible stories so much as construct dungeons and encounters and place minimal story tissue between her dungeons and encounters. This is great if you like dungeon diving and min-maxing, but unfortunately for my next character, I am not the kind of player who can manage themselves in a dungeon dive, or min-max. I based my third druid around eventually getting the Stoneteller spell, because I had graduated from being enamored with talking to animals to being enamored with talking to plants and inanimate objects. I then thought to myself, wouldn't it be fun if I made intelligence my dump stat? Instead of, like, strength or something? And thus connected the tracks, leading to I am going to base this character's personality around the phrase dumb as a rock, and they will have an encyclopedic knowledge of rocks and minerals and almost nothing else. Then I named them Firely. Farley was also the first non-binary character I ever played, a he-they with no defined gender experience, because much like how it's common for aspecs to be colorblind for horny, I am agender, and my entire life, the very concept of gender, draws only blanks in my mind. So, because I based my character sheet around rocks and chose a horse for my animal companion and planned to take the mounted combat feat, I was so incredibly ineffective the whole time. And at one point, I died twice in the same session. And then we dropped the campaign partway through because everyone was getting frustrated with the party comp and their character builds and how long it took 10 people to level up via XP. And I decided then was a perfect time to try out multi-classing and homebrew simultaneously. My next character, and my first ever non-druid, was a half-dwarven sorcerer fighter multi-class. He has probably the angstiest backstory of all my characters to date, not that that means much with this batch of characters and my sensibilities, but the thing about that backstory is, I know I gave this character a name. However, in his backstory, when his adoptive brother is found out to be a doppelganger and he sides with his brother, he loses his name. And I forgot his original name. I just remember that me and the player who made the doppelganger wanted to do a fun play on Thor and Loki, so I gave him a warhammer, chose all the lightning spells I could get my hands on, and decided the pseudonym he went by in lieu of a proper name was Zap. I feel kind of bad, because that's such a weird moniker, and I feel like it doesn't quite get much of him across. But I guess that's the point of it, but I don't remember his name. Ah! He and the rest of the party are part of a traveling mercenary carnival, which I thought was just the coolest combination. And old habits die hard, because I decided he handled the animals. I dropped off of playing with that group before we reached the end of the campaign, but we adopted both a goblin and a baby dragon before I left. The piercings he has are actually an addition I decided upon when I was making this drawing. I just felt like he deserves piercings. He deserves nice things. For my final and favorite character, I think it's time I addressed the neon dragonborn in the room. This section's gonna be like a little looser because I just sort of decided I was going to ramble for Oleander specifically, as little a treat for me. So this little dragonborn is named Oleander. The first idea for Oleander came actually during the campaigns where I was playing Farley and Zap, where it's just this inkling came to my mind. What if I played with the race rules a little bit? That would be so cool. Gee, I wonder how I'd do that. And then I also had the idea of wouldn't it be so cool if the visual aesthetic of the character did not at all match their personality and vibes? So my thought was, ooh, flower power pink jock character. That was that was my first instinct for Oleander's personality. Then I thought to myself, okay. So, a lot of the rules in D&D circle around this idea of your race also having to be the culture in which you were raised. What if I just mess with that entirely? So, I decided I was going to make my flower power pink dragonborn also raised by dwarves in just this random place out in the middle of nowhere. Now, as I said earlier, I left the group that I had been with for the last, year and a half? 3 of my friends from the theater department in school were wouldn't it be so cool if we could just play Dungeons and Dragons? And then one of them was hey, actually, I think I want to try my hand at DMing. So I plucked my little concept for Oleander, and I smoothed it out, and I thought to myself, I haven't really been leaning into any wish fulfillment, really, for my previous characters. It was never an idealized version of all of the things that I thought were the coolest in a person, where Oleander was so super bold and confident and knew what was going on most of the time, super competent, everyone from their hometown really liked them, this, that, and the other thing, and When I first played them, I somehow just ended up making them really self-conscious and grumpy. Because, like, I wanted Oleander to be all these neat things, but I didn't even know how to fake being confident. Like, I was such a wreck in high school. A friend of mine has told me I am incredibly traumatized, and boy howdy do I believe him. The only thing I knew how to make Oleander confident in, so to speak, was, like, their general gender thing, because, like, I now had a vague grasp of the concept of gender, as opposed to just being like, oh, that's a thing that other people care about, for some reason. Blink, blink. So I knew Oleander's gender thing was like, I sure have a lot of gender, and it sure is pretty fluid. I have, like, way more specific stories to tell about Oleander, because the first D&D group, where we actually RP'd, we were not physically in the room together, we were, like, all doing it over Discord, across the country. And as I said of my second group, it was very dungeon divey and min-maxy. Role-playing was, like, such a backseat thing that, like, it wasn't even in the rearview mirror. What a mixed metaphor I've just made. But this group was a bunch of theater kids, and we were all in the same room together. So, like, we were vibing! Oleander's relationship with the rogue in the party was so delightful because it was so contentious between the two of them. Like, Oleander was like this lawful good, are you going to return that or not kind of person. And the party's rogue, was just like, are you gonna make me? Just like, it was so fun. It was so fun because, like, I guess I have learned that I have a good time playing characters who would bounce off the rogue in a party in a very, odd couple, buddy cop kind of way. I remember one session where, there had just been this, like, big, emotional, thing that had happened to the rogue specifically, where she was, like, you know, doing her own thing, being, like, broody and also doing crime. And meanwhile, my character didn't know about this, so whenever the DM checked in with the rest of us, I was going, well, the baby badger that we saved, from those dire rats in the sewers. So I'm gonna take one of the little laundry hampers and I'm gonna put it upside down and I'm gonna fill it with a bunch of blankets and I was just, like, narrating how I was taking care of this little baby badger as a point of levity and character building. But I think my favorite story about Oleander has to do with Oleander learning Draconic for the first time. Because, as I've said, Oleander was raised by dwarves, and so knows Dwarven and not Draconic. And over the course of, like, the first, like, 2 months or something that we were at this, I realized, oh, actually, I have completely unintentionally made Oleander this outlet for my internal struggles over being biracial and not being raised with a giant chunk of my own heritage, because, like, in case you couldn't tell by my incredibly white-sounding voice, I am, in fact, half of a black person. It's a very interesting experience. Would not recommend. So, because Oleander, was kidnapped as an egg, and then reclaimed by, a bunch of, randos in the middle of nowhere from a bunch of smugglers, Oleander has no idea where they're even from. They just know that they want to know more about, like, this very obvious piece of themselves that they don't know anything about. And I just think that's really neat. So at one point, the party's on a pirate ship, and the pirate ship has a dragonborn crewmate. And Oleander works up the nerve to just walk up and be like, hi! And then partway through responding, the DM says, oh, this is all in Draconic. And I'm like, oh no, it's in Draconic? And it was just this little moment of Oleander being like, trying her best to be polite, and going like, I don't know Draconic. And then, I swear to you, the immediate response that came from this NPC was,
What, did your parents hate you or something? It was amazing. It was horrible, but it was amazing. And like this, and Oleander like explains, no, I mean, my mother loved me very much. I just, you know, I was raised around dwarves, so like I didn't learn Draconic. I learned Dwarven, so. And then he literally responds, oh well, I mean, there's plenty of Dwarven crew members on the ship. Like, oh my gosh, that like stung so bad. And he was like, oh, yes, probably, and then just, like, slinks away. Oh, baby. So, like, the next day or something, Oleander, like, is, like, trying her bestest to be helpful on the ship. And he goes to that same Dragonborn crew member that he found earlier, and he says, you're right, that it's a shame for a Dragonborn to not know Draconic, and I was wondering if maybe you would teach me some. And like I had to roll a whole ass persuasion roll. Somehow I succeeded, because like persuasion was not one of the stats that I that I leaned into. Of course, I was a ranger, and I was the tank. Like literally, the DM at some point was like, okay, you are literally neon pink and giant compared to the other two party members. Like, I think I might just straight up have all the enemies automatically aggro onto you. And I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. But then Oleander learned some Dragonborn vocabulary, mostly related to ship things. And then like I had to do like a performance, like a memory intelligence check or whatever, and like I managed to remember most of it. I did it. I really did it. It was so fun. Now, you may have noticed Pumavine is the only character to reach the end of a campaign. Like at all. She didn't even reach the end of a campaign. Hers was just the one that came to an official stop for Watsonian reasons. And I'm actually very at peace with that. I don't think there's any shame in picking up a campaign, putting it down, and never going back to it. TTRPGs are games, and things don't always line up for you to play a game with the amount of devotion necessary to finish something as improv and collaboration based and time consuming as a TTRPG. Even though none of them really have finished arcs, I really do love all of my PCs, and I think they deserve to have a tea party together. I'm genuinely surprised that my voice is like sore after that. Like, how? Excuse you? It's probably because I haven't been drinking water and this closet is kind of toasty or something. I don't know. But I am nothing if not riddled with ADHD. As I said at the top, I guess. Go read Prison of Plastic, by the way. I mean, like, the audiobook is out. And there's a PDF version around somewhere. Anyway, I guess go roll a dice or something, just to see what happens. Bye!